1. I'm a 26-year-old female, live in a rented house with a single mother, 30 female, and her son, 6. I had another person living with me, but they moved out and the mother moved in. I don't mind living with her and her kid. It's fine and we kind of do our own thing. I spend a lot of time at my boyfriend's place or working. Our work schedules collide, so we really don't interact much, but when we do, it's fine, no issue there. I want to start with saying that she clearly struggles financially, but I don't think it's an excuse. I don't make lots of money either. However, I've noticed that my food would go missing or portions would be taken from it. I assumed it was her kid, so I asked her if she'd stop him from eating my food. I was calm about it and she just said she would. It didn't really upset me when it first started. It started getting annoying when I'd get home from work and expect to have a meal's worth of leftovers in the fridge, only to see it picked through or just gone. I'd keep bringing it up and she started getting annoyed with me bringing it up. Just from observing them, I realized that neither of them ever eat vegetables. And judging by the food that would get picked through and the food that would be left untouched, anything with green in it was avoided. Orange chicken would be gone, but chicken with broccoli would be untouched. So I started putting vegetables in everything. I find them to be delicious, and anything green or not a potato does not get eaten. So I could mix some bell peppers into the food and it would be fine. I make a big portion of vegetables pretty frequently anyway, so I just started putting it in everything I eat. If I had leftover mashed potatoes, I'd pour green beans in and mix it up. If I had leftover cheesy bacon fries, I'd pour broccoli all over it and mix it in. Usually, my homemade stuff has vegetables in it, but I started making sure everything did. I made a pot of mac and cheese, the kids' favorite thing, and poured in roasted Brussels sprouts, which is actually delicious to me, and I'm eating more vegetables, so it's win-win. She had been seeming annoyed, but we were all home when I made the pot of mac and cheese. She was in the living room and saw me get out the Brussels sprouts and was like, "What are you going to do with that?" And I poured them in. She said I was being greedy and annoying. I just said, "I like Brussels sprouts," and that was it. She said we need food and I told her to go get some. Or stop buying only pre-packaged things and your money will go further. I think she sees this as some big act of revenge, but I just simply want to be able to eat my food. Also want to add that sharing is not the issue. It's expecting to have food there and it's not. So often I'd be working a long day and get home expecting to have a meal's worth of food and it'd all be gone. Or I wake up in a rush and had my food ready to eat in the morning only to find it gone. So now I have to skip breakfast. If she would simply text sometimes, "Hey, is it okay if we eat whatever food item?" I would know and know to make other plans. I would stop for food or know I have to whip something up when I get home. Also, I think eating the last of someone else's food is crazy and rude. If someone makes a big pot of something and you ask for a serving, sure. But if someone made something and there is one serving left, and you eat it without permission, that is evil as hell. 2. Info I know will be asked. I and my wife paid for the wedding ourselves, no one else. EM helped with putting marzipan on the cakes, as my wife's sister did the cakes, but she didn't feel so good at a point because of her medical condition. FYI, I don't blame her, and she's not at fault for any of this. So, I and wife had to make the decor and fillings of the cakes. Some context, I'm a 24-year-old male, and my now wife, 21 female, recently got married. Kinda small wedding with about 25 guests attending, although it was supposed to be around 35 guests. But some were unable to attend last minute for non-important details. Close family and friends. We had help from one of the guests with buying and preparing the food, and also do the cooking at the wedding, grilled. As the guest works as a head chef and kitchen manager and does catering from time to time, she offered to help us with this, and the only thing we had to do was pay for the groceries, all the time preparing and cooking and planning, was her and her fiancé's wedding gift to us. Would have cost between $1,000 and $1,500 if we hired her instead. She planned the meal so there would be enough for 40 people to make sure it was enough for the initial 35, meaning a lot of leftovers now. The story begins the day before the wedding when wife's dad informs us that he doesn't want to attend. He had been weary if he wanted to attend to show support or if that was too much even. Note, we wanted to know who would attend 2 months prior, but EM and Sis would attend. So they finished the last stuff for the cakes and then arrived. Sis was a bridesmaid, so she did her part during the ceremony. EM showed minimal support throughout the whole ceremony, the only person to not shed a single tear during the entire time. Although it was very emotional, even the wedding officiant and guests plus one cried a bit because it was very beautiful and emotional, but not EM. After dinner was finished and cake had been eaten, and mingle time was at the end for guests not sleeping there, which means EM is leaving as well, she asks to get some of the leftovers so that Sis could have some lunch tomorrow. Bring the unopened meat, the sauces and dressings, and put the sauces in smaller containers so it was less for us to fix tomorrow. I've said, of course, that was reasonable, but I was more skeptical since this seemed very out of place for how she had acted during this whole ordeal. So I asked how they would bring them back to town. We lived 2 minutes apart from them, and the wedding was 45 minutes away. She said they have a cooler because they brought the cakes, so if they brought the unused food it wouldn't spoil. And I double-checked with her and was clear she understood that it was only transporting if they would do so. And of course she understood that. They left, and not much more happened until the day after. Wife dropped me off at our place and we started unloading everything, and while I sorted where they should go and unpacked all the gifts and clothes, wife picked up the sauce containers from their apartment that Sis had prepared. EM had gone out to their caravan again. Yes, they have, so they can live somewhat comfortable. When she returned with just the sauce, I asked where the rest of the stuff was. She said EM must have forgotten it in the cooler and brought it to the caravan. We didn't think more about it at that point since we still had plenty of leftovers that had to be eaten first anyway. Fast forward to yesterday, when all hell broke loose, since today wife was supposed to drive Sis to the caravan, so she can be there when EM goes back at the end of the week. We borrow one of their cars to do this, we pay for the gas when we do it, and we ask first if it's okay to borrow. She texted EM and the following conversation ensued. Did you take the meat to the caravan?
Yes.
Have you eaten it?
No.
Could I bring it back tomorrow when I drive Sis?
Why?
Because we want it.
Fine, you can leave the car and garage keys at home. And you don't need to borrow the car anymore. We'll come and get Sis ourselves, putting the meat in the fridge.
Wow, just because we want the meat back that we paid for, that I didn't mean that you could bring it to the caravan. It was because you had a cooler so it wouldn't spoil since it's vacuum sealed. I don't get to borrow the car anymore.
Exactly. I think it's very greedy of you two not to treat us with the meat that I thought you meant we could bring. All we have given you two during your relationship. We have a limit too, you know.
Wife writes again about how it was a wedding gift and apologizes if they misunderstood each other. And for example, that OP's parents didn't bring anything from the wedding and didn't even ask. And that OP double-checked so EM understood that the unopened food was not theirs to keep. EM calls wife, but I answer instead because she is crying and EM wants to speak to her, but I inform her that she is not fit for a call right now, but she is listening in the background if there was anything important. EM asks that wife calls her when she's able to, and then I and her start having an argument about the food again. I'm paraphrasing a bit because it's not in English.
We took the unopened food because we could see that you two wouldn't be able to eat all of it before it got spoiled, and it was very greedy of you not to let us have it.
We didn't plan to keep it all ourselves, but it's a wedding gift, and we decide who should get what, since there's a lot of other guests at the wedding who have also supported us through our relationship. But since it's a wedding gift, it's not only about food, but also it's a matter of principle. To not take others' wedding gifts because it's very rude, and not at all okay without permission.
Well, Ask her to call us when she can. Bye.
I calmed my wife down and walked the dog, and wrote a long text to EM to summarize the whole ordeal and to give her more perspective, and I've still not gotten an answer back, nor has my wife almost 14 hours after I hit send. The message read as follows. Hi, I'll try to get wife to call you tomorrow so you can talk. And about keeping all the food ourselves. Some of the meat you took, 3 different kinds, was served at the wedding. You took all the unopened, and some are vacuum sealed and will be good for a long time, as long as it stays frozen. So expiration date on that isn't an issue. Second of all, the food is up to us to divide and share as we see fit. And we had planned to give most of it to one of my best men, who had to leave before the food was served, so he didn't get anything at the wedding. And he is couch surfing because he is homeless. Long story, but he has a job again since almost a month back. But instead, you who are currently in your caravan in the archipelago, and have half your freezer stuffed with meat, most of which is venison, somehow felt more entitled to it. That's why we got mad, not because we're greedy. We, especially me, have a very different perception and opinion of what greed is. So if you or her dad have any problem with this ordeal, then scold me instead of her, since I will be less bothered about it. Hope this gives a little more perspective about this. This was the end of events until now. We picked up the meat, and my wife is yet to call EM. 3. So I work in minimum wage fast food, doing overnight shifts, and tonight a children's party came in about 11 p.m. A mother of one of the children, presumably the birthday child's parent, immediately came up to the counter and threatened to call police and get the manager fined if anyone in the restaurant is swearing, staff and or other patrons. Now, I personally have autism and ADHD, and tend to swear a lot, and can censor myself when children are present if asked politely, but immediately threatening to call the police on us and get my manager fined is pretty dodgy. My manager on shift tried to explain to the woman that she isn't actually from our store and was actually from another store, but the woman rudely claimed it doesn't matter and she doesn't care, and that she works as a manager in the supermarket and she knows the law. About 20 minutes later, she came up again and told us the restaurant was putrid and gave us 30 minutes to fix it, or she was going to take photos and report us to whatever my state's health board was. Now, it is a Saturday night and the overnight crew had been on for about 30 minutes. We run Saturdays with 4 people, and everyone was doing their best to try to get ahead of the rush before it got too bad, so diverting someone to clean the dining room wasn't very high on the priority list, as we tend to do a thorough clean around 3 a.m. My manager came up and asked me to clean, and upon inspecting it wasn't too bad, and by no means was it worth reporting on. The only real thing that I could see as needing immediate attention was that all the bins in the dining room were overfull and needed changing, which I did immediately. At about 11:30, my manager decided to close the dining room so we could give it a proper clean, and warned the party they had until midnight to vacate, to which they replied, "Oh, we'll be gone by then anyway." At about the same time, a group of people came up to the door and asked to come in, and the manager explained, due to safety, there's been some robberies in the area, and closing the dining room on overnight has been suggested by law enforcement. Our dining room is closed. After their arguments failed and they had left, the husband of the party group tried to get me in trouble by asking why I didn't have the manager's back, to which she explained that if I get hurt, it can get me and her in a lot of trouble. So I stayed out of it, something I'm not usually good at. All in all, they spent about 45 minutes in our store, complained multiple times, and only ordered maybe $45 worth of food. And when it came 12, they hadn't even started packing up, so my manager politely informed them that it was now midnight and they needed to leave, and then politely asked them to either take the decorations they had put up with them or put them in the bin. They all started leaving, and after they had, we noticed they had decided to leave all their rubbish on the table, as well as some of it on the floor. Bit of an anticlimactic ending. Sorry, but hope you enjoyed the listen. 4. So, before 2018, my father-in-law met this weird girl who was one of those whack jobs who thought that she owned the universe and shouldn't have to apologize for her behavior. When first meeting her, she would do this strange thing, claiming she was socially inept and couldn't handle talking to strangers. She even went as far in the following years as to throw herself in harm's way to avoid talking to people, and would claim they were in the wrong for being there, unannounced or uninvited. Both of these were lies every time. Despite not caring for her strange antics, my husband, John, would often let the abnormal behavior go and tell his father that since he seemed genuinely happy for the first time since his mother passed away, he was cool with whatever decision he decided. Not to mention that father-in-law was a grown man who didn't need his son's permission and was only looking for his input. Father-in-law is very caring and Mormon, so he is very religious. We didn't find out until much later that she forced her way into his life to marry into the family because she was crazy. Come around 2018, my husband and I are getting married. Aside from a few things that irked us, the hole she was digging for herself kept growing, constantly ridiculing us for something she disagreed with. Munster would go on more than one occasion to erase my mother-in-law by telling my father-in-law she would destroy or get rid of all his electronics, forcing my father-in-law to clean after the dog he never wanted, nor had the time to take care of, working 12-plus-hour shifts. At the same time, she remained jobless. The list was growing, and the enormous pile of crap was how manipulative she had gotten. Father-in-law was constantly asking Munster if he could visit his mother. You heard me right. He was 20 years her senior at least, and she had a problem with him seeing his sister and mother literally across the street because they'll convince you to divorce me. The straw that broke the camel's back was my eldest daughter. During the wedding, Munster faked illness and lied to everyone attending that she was paying for and doing everything for the wedding, and that she should have the most pity because of everything she was going through. FYI, my mother was the one who shelled out nearly $30,000 for our wedding, and that was comparatively small. We tried hard to work with Munster on the one event she offered to host to make it relatively cheap on her and father-in-law, because she was unable to make a lot of money. We learned that because of her constantly getting in debt with loan sharks for scams she used to pull, we aren't money hungry, and I was happier just enjoying a nice barbecue with the family rather than going to a restaurant. She worked out. During this time, she continually disregarded what we wanted for our wedding. She practically tried to force us to have a wedding in Vegas and get hitched, something I told her and my family I was not comfortable with because of personal issues I was dealing with at the time. Then she had the gall to try and guilt-trip us into spending our baby-making honeymoon in Florida with her family, something that we were extremely uncomfortable with, considering we had never met them before. And from what she had said to us prior, they wouldn't like us because of our political views anyway. I had to tell her no, not exaggerating, 17 times, that we had already paid for a spot for our honeymoon where we could enjoy ourselves alone. She offered her medicinal weed to minors at the party, rolled down a hill of grass in the wedding dress my father-in-law paid for, and then crawled around on the ground during the reception to throw cake at a child. We still, for some ungodly reason, tried to reason with Munster for the sake of my father-in-law, but John had enough of her. Come time after the honeymoon, we found out that I am pregnant. We tell everyone is happy, and then more drama incurs. Munster kept trying to push her views on other people, saying that we were wrong to have a gender reveal party, and call our baby anything because the baby hasn't decided what gender it wants to be yet. We decided to name our daughter after my mother-in-law because it was my husband's wish, and I was more than happy to comply because my mother-in-law to this day is a saint, and we miss her terribly. R.I.P. Mama. So, we decided to have a baby shower that aligned perfectly with mother-in-law's birthday. It was our way of celebrating old life with new life. I wanted there to be boys and girls to showcase how much her family loved her. However, Munster and father-in-law planned to be out of town, never wound up going, and asked if we would do a small get-together instead. I agreed to keep the peace, but She instead went behind my back, planned out an entirely second baby shower, did not invite a single person from my side of the family, and refused to have any boys there. She even went as far as to bitch at me because my mother refused to come, and there were a few boys that I invited that she was uncomfortable with coming. Things got worse when, closer to delivery, she was offended that I did not want her in the delivery room because I was pre-eclampsia. And she was used to making my blood boil and spike high with her antics. I politely told her the only ones allowed in the room were my husband and mother, and she claimed she would impersonate a doctor and sneak into my room. Thankfully, that was shut down quickly, as if I wasn't already dealing with a ton. Next, she caused drama in the waiting room the entire time I was in labor, claiming, "Why did we even come if it's going to take so long? I have better things I could be doing." Then, after the fact, she made a disgusting comment that made John angry. "I don't know how it happened, but some of my DNA got into this baby somehow." She was not blood-related to any of us, and it upset my husband that, like with many other things, she kept making everything about her and not about our baby. Needless to say, after all the hell monster had put us through, her constantly lying about her medical history made us weary of her actions. Their house was always covered in dog poop and piss because she refused to clean it. "I'll vomit at the smell of it," and said she was prone to fainting spells and could die any day without warning. John and I were not okay with this woman ever being alone at home with our baby. She even commented about giving my baby things to keep her calm on more than one occasion, and how she felt uncomfortable letting any boys near my baby because I don't know what triggers boys to become pedophiles, including John and father-in-law. Yeah, a real piece of work. So finally, after one too many incidents, we tell her off and inform Monster and father-in-law of the ground rules we have set. She flips out and calls us the a-holes for keeping her grandbaby away from her, even though she was the one who cut contact. My exact words to her were, "If you still want to make contact with our baby, we don't mind meeting in an open public space of your choosing, where she won't be affected by whatever is giving her hives in your house." And her reply was, "No, I can't bond with something being dangled above my head like a carrot on a stick." John saw red. He wanted to cut Monster and father-in-law out of our lives for good. I managed to calm him down enough to try to keep father-in-law in the loop, considering she was very clearly manipulating him to this point. There's so much to it, but basically, after many threats to our lives, where she said, "You have no idea what I'm capable of. I will do whatever it takes to get my way," and at one point threatening to hurt my husband if he didn't comply with her views, we blocked her in all forms of media. Her response was to use her secondary account to message him and say, "Blocking me? Oh, so mature." And we blocked her again. We even threatened legal action because she constantly texted us through father-in-law's phone. It was easy to know who was talking based on vocabulary. And in the end, it was hilarious when she and father-in-law tried to press the grandparents' rights on us. All I had to say to that was, "Let's see what the courts think about your wife illegally growing marijuana in the basement, leaving disgusting dog feces all over the house for 12+ hours until you get home, an aggressive dog that will eat the back of your skull, her constant abusive and neglectful behavior, and her constant medical problems which include fainting and death at a moment's notice, and see if she's still capable of suing for grandparents' rights in that home." Newsflash, she doesn't have a case. We are a loving family that has tried everything to include and deal with her childish and obnoxious behavior. But she has shut us out. Now we're done. Since around 2020-2021, we've been rid of her, and officially she is gone, so party. And to anyone with a similar problem with these monsters, do not be afraid to say no. Record their neglectful behavior and seek professional help against them. You are not wrong for wanting to protect yourself. Love you guys, and I hope you have a great time listening. 5. I accept the fact that I could be partially to blame for this happening. But I had completely forgotten about having cash in this pants pocket, and because my parents were too lazy to hurry up and buy a new washer for us to wash our clothes, instead of just repeatedly going to the laundromat every other week, especially since I'm working almost every weekend, and 90% of the time, they don't even bother to check if I have clothes to be washed. At the start of this month, my parents decided to get rid of our couch that we've owned for as long as I can remember. Evidenced by the amount of time my grandma has patched it up so the stuffing wouldn't keep falling out of it. I wish they hadn't gotten rid of the other 2 couches that was given to us by an elderly neighbor from our previous house. No, they just left it behind at our old house and let the new homeowner claim it for themselves. So, I'm at work and my parents decided that they would go wash our clothes, and with it my pants where the cash was at. If they had just texted me and asked if they could have used some of the cash, I would have said sure, they can use some. Instead, they just went ahead and spent half of it without my consent. I didn't know about this fact until after they came to pick me up from work, and Dad said to my mom, "Hey, give Dragon Crystal her cash." What? Mom hands me the remaining cash and says, "Oh, you'll have some cash in your pants." I was just about to say, "Oh, okay, at least you found it before accidentally washing it," until my dad proudly said, "If we hadn't found it, someone else would have found it and been rich." I'm just shocked and thought to myself, wait, you're making it sound like I had $1 million sitting in my pockets. And I don't remember having more than a few 10s and 5s with the occasional 20. But they made it sound like I'm just rolling in dough. It can be due to me saving money and only spending a small amount unless needed, then I'll spend more. Still doesn't give my parents the right to spend my money without my consent. Also, I'll note that my parents were always talking about getting a new washing machine, but they have yet to take the step to get one, just yet. Except repeatedly making the excuse of the reason the washer broke so easily was because the landlord kept smashing it on things while bringing it into the house. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to The Impractical Proudness of Parents, Ipop, episode 114. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you'd like to get the videos a little bit earlier, you can support me on a monthly basis for as little or as much as you like through my Patreon, which is linked in the description. You'll also find the Teespring store there to get yourself some amazing Hellfreezer merchandise. If you'd like to support the channel on a one-off basis, you can also make donations during streams and videos like this one. While this is not required, it is appreciated. Alrighty, no other business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what's your favorite improv ingredient? Like if you're making a recipe, it calls for one thing, you're out of it, then you use a substitute. For me, if I'm out of milk, I'll use either cream, if I have it, or cream cheese, which I generally have a little tub of. I needed milk while I was making dinner earlier tonight, didn't have any, won't go shopping for another day or two, but I had cream cheese, and that worked out, well, quite frankly, it was extra yummy. It was a little better than usual. So, let me know what you think in a comment below. And with that, I'm gonna head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.